guys, welcome back to the Sync My Music podcast. This week is one you definitely don't want to miss, especially if you have some doubts, some hesitations, or some worries whether or not sync licensing is going to work out for you in the long run. Because as my guest today, Todd Andrew, will let you know, it was not always roses and puppies and sunshine on his journey to now really doing well. Like, he's probably one of the most successful sync licensing producers I know, and I'm really honored to say that because I started with the guy. We actually started together with the same library 13 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. And so it's really cool to see how far he's come. He can talk about some of the stuff he's done, how well he's been doing. But I really wanted to bring him on because I want you guys to see for yourself firsthand. Todd's a regular guy, regular dude, really talented, obviously, but he basically just stuck it out. That's really what he did. And we want to really kind of dive into his story. And so you guys know that it is possible to stick it out. And I know that when you're in the first couple of years, especially in this business, it really feels impossible. It feels like there's this giant mountain in front of you. And when you get disappointing royalty checks, or you're getting rejected by libraries, or not getting the opportunities that you submitted for, it kind of just feels like the world's just beating you up. And you guys need to all know, and I think you'll get this by the end of this conversation, that that is normal and that should be expected in your sync licensing journey. So if you feel that, don't think that you're doing something wrong or you're on the wrong path. Just know that that's just sort of paying your dues to get to where you want to be. So Todd, thank you so much for joining us today, man. Let us know a little bit about what kind of music you make, maybe some of your more notable placements that people would recognize, and then we'll dive into kind of the beginning story of how you got into this business.
Yes, of course, that is the question that when people ask, hey, what kind of music do you do? That always stumps me. I'm like, I was like, everything? But normally I do rock. I'm a guitar player, pretty much. That's where I started off, and that's when my passion is playing electric guitar. But as far as music I've made with library stuff, pretty much every style of music. In the last 10 years, it's been kind of like school. We've done, so because of that, I've gotten into programming hip-hop beats, doing electronic stuff and orchestral stuff. Some of the more notable placements, a lot of the library stuff is in reality shows like Barking Wars and Mob Wives. I've done a lot of themes, which has been nice as well. And that's a whole kind of in the library realm, but sort of different. It's like more custom making stuff, and the themes. The notable themes is there's a Disney show called The Mighty Med, which I did the theme song to that. A lot of sports. Somehow I became a sports guy, which is weird because I don't watch sports. I don't like sports. I was a nerd in high school. So, but I did the Honda Sports Desk update on NBC. First Things First on Fox Sports 1. It's a morning show. Did that one. In the afternoon, I have a show called Lock It In, which I did the theme for that. And then 2 hours after that, there was a show called Inside PPC Tonight on also Fox Sports. So I have three themes on Fox Sports. I'm pretty much the sound of Fox Sports at this point. And then Football Night in America, which is kind of the lead into Sunday Night Football. I had 2 years where I was the theme for that. And so, yeah, just keeping it going. I just got a new one, Brother from Another, on NBC Peacock, which I don't have Peacock, but I got to check it out.
Damn, you are killing it, man. Congrats on all of that, dude. I know that that's very lucrative. Theme songs are pretty much the cream of the crop in this business. So I know that you are raking in some decent money with that, man. So that's really cool for you. Now, let's dive into, because I know when people hear that, that's sort of the highlight reel, right? That's the stuff that's really exciting and notable and gets people really excited about being in this business, but that did not come with a week of work in your career. This has been something you've been working for over a decade now. Obviously, you and I kind of started together. So let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you before sync licensing? How did you hear about this business? And what made you decide, yeah, this is the path for me. I want to give this a shot.
Well, before I was in LA, I was doing the typical, I'm going to form a band and get signed and make it. And this was the early 2000s. And then the one band I was in sort of disappeared in flames. And then I was sort of floating out there working crappy day jobs, making minimum wage. And I got into making beats for all the wrong reasons because I thought, hey, Timberland makes a lot of money. And it's kind of easy, so I'm going to do it too. And I genuinely liked hip hop, but I looking at that point in my life, I was learning how to program stuff, but it was so primitive. I was on Pro Tools. I was literally taking a kick drum and like putting it on the screen and like, oh look, there's a beat. And but then I started working with some MCs and rappers in the area. I lived in North Hollywood, and there's one rapper, Stylistic Jones. And he said, "Hey, you got to meet my friend Christian," because he saw that I did other things. And I was like, "All right," and I remember thinking a week before, because I was in sort of minimum wage hell and hating it. I was like, you know what? I would really love if there's a way that I could just sit at home and make music, and like this stuff on TV. Who does that stuff? Like all the in between stuff. I could do that. And I tell my friend, "Yeah, I don't think that exists." So then a week later, I meet Christian, and Styles takes me over to his house, and I'm just like, I don't know anything about it. And he pulls out a check. He's like, "Check this out." Like, it was a pretty sizable amount of money. He's like, "I get these every 3 months." I was like, I was like, "Really?" And so this was 2005, and so everything was still different back then. We actually had to press up physical CDs, and so he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "But I'm telling you," he said right off the bat, "this didn't come easy." He had been doing it for 10 years at that point, and so he's like, but it is possible." And he literally showed me that first day, look, like actual proof. In the music industry, everyone's got so many promises. "Hey man, like we're going to make you big and we're going to sign this contract." Nobody actually shows you anything. He actually showed me something. Look, this. And so then he kind of explained how library music works, which I never had really even heard of at that point. And so I was like, "Sign me up, let's do it." And although that first year of 2005, I made like 6 tracks for him on my primitive Pro Tools. I sent it to him. He did put those in his blazed out library, but I disappeared off the radar. Like I did the 6 tracks and then I just stopped. And I think the reason is because kind of what a lot of people do. They kind of wonder, is this going to work for me? And it's such a long haul, it's such a mountain. And so I was like, I started working on sort of a solo project where I was like the vocalist and the singer, and I was like, that's my passion, I'm going to do that. And then, but as you will see, I came back around to library music. But yeah, so that's the early days of the 2005-ish area.
Awesome, man. And so with that era, 2005, that was about 3 years before I discovered it and started doing this kind of stuff. You kind of jumped in, got out, got back in. Let's talk about some of those early disappointing royalty checks and some of the doubts that you really got into for the first couple of years. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember calling me? Because you actually called me, I think it was 2011, 2012. I remember sitting in my home studio, and I remember where I was. I just remember the conversation. It was such a very vivid conversation, very vivid memory. So, yeah, let's definitely talk about that because even though you called me and I pretended to have a lot of confidence, I was in the same boat as you, man. And I just kind of felt like, well, he's wanting some reassurance. I'm going to give him some reassurance. But I had all the same doubts as well. So let's talk about those early years and some of those moments of like, crap, is this really going to work out?
Well, I remember the first thing that I was working at, this was before all that. This was still in like 2008. I was working at a record store. And one of the 6 songs that I got placed in the Blaze Out library got placed on Friday Night Lights, and I got a phone call. "Hey, your song's at Friday Night Lights." I was like, "What?" And I told my coworkers, and I was like the rock star of the day. Like, "I got a song in a TV show, yeah." And then, but I didn't get an actual BMI royalty check because I think they still do. They don't cut you a check if it's under $250. And then I was working a different job, and suddenly one day I got a check for $250. And I was like, "What?" And when you're working minimum wage, that's like a week's salary right there. And so. But that was like, I looked at how much you got per placement. I was like, well, like seriously, I got Friday Night Lights, I got $5. Like I thought it'd be more than that. And but that kind of got me reinvigorated, like, like I should do this more. So I reached out to Christian again, and he's like, "All right, let's get this on." And I got Logic. I finally got my gear upgraded, and so I was in LA. I started now making tracks regularly for him. At that point, we were doing rap rock. And so that's my first introduction into it. Like, we're doing a CD of all rap rock stuff. And I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. So by the point I had moved out of LA, the cool thing about modern technology is you don't have to live in LA to do this. I met my connection in LA, but then I moved back to my hometown in Paso Robles. And it was a kind of a cool situation where I had time. And so I just started hitting it hard. But yeah, at the point where I called you, I always struggled with the process of making tracks, and I still feel like I don't have it down quite a bit. But like as far as, because a lot of things, a lot of my friends, they see what I do and they're like, oh, I want to do that. Like, that sounds cool. You get to sit at home and make music. I'm like, yeah. Or one of my favorites is hey, I got this song. You want it? Like, you can use it. I was like, yeah, it doesn't really work that way. Like, we can't just make whatever the hell we want. Like, they have specific things that they're looking for. And like at that point, I called it, we were doing sports tracks, which turned out to be good for me. But at that time, I didn't know how to make a sports track. And so at the time, there's no information online or anywhere about how to make library tracks. And because there's a certain thing that you got to structure it a certain way, you got to hit certain things, you got to have like a cool chorus, you got to have a breakdown, intro, outro. And as far as like the creative process of doing it, because I would just sit there looking at a blank screen going, like they would make me a sports track that sounds like this and this. I'm like, okay. And I'd kind of like hit some chords. What is it? How do you just create something out of thin air with something, an end result in mind? So yeah, that's when I called you, and you had a few ideas. You like, as far as taking a reference track, like basically ripping stuff off, which in a good way, like having an end result. Like I pull in a reference track. I want something like that, but not like that. And so yeah, at that point, but I was still at that. I was hitting it pretty hard, making. There was 1 year back then where I made 120 tracks in 1 year, and because at that point my motivation was, okay, if I do this, I can make a living off this, and I'll never have to have a crappy day job ever again. But it was pretty slow going, and the royalty checks were under 1,000 for like those first 4 or 5 years. And so I'm doing all this work and getting like little minimal stuff and pretty much mooshing off my parents at that point.
So this is what I want to talk about, because that is what most people would give up on, right? Most people see that result and go, I'm out. Like, yeah, some money is okay. I don't want to be like ungrateful, for sure. I'm getting paid to make music, right? But I can't really live on this, and it's not growing. I don't see a future here. So, it's so funny you said that, like you wanted to do anything other than have those crappy day jobs. I think I had the exact same motivation. I worked for a startup company, which is just, if you've ever worked for one, it is a nightmare because they expect you to work 80 hours a week. And you're under salary, though, so there's no overtime or anything. Everything's on a shoestring budget, but you do have to give your entire life over to it. So I had this really negative experience with my day job at the time, too. And so I thought, like, well, I'll do anything. Literally, I will clean toilets. I will scrub. I will do anything as long as I'm self-employed. I work for myself, and I can kind of have some control over what I do. So I think you and I were probably lined up on that, like, desperation of like, I don't care what it is, and yeah, this isn't great yet, but there's something here. So I want to know, what was in those checks or in your career? Was it just that you were like, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I have no other options. I don't want to go anywhere else. What actually got you through those first couple of years where it didn't seem like it was for sure going to work out?
I think motivation from Christian, because his checks were rising quite a bit. And so he said, dude, and he would just give me these pep talks, and he would say, stick with it. And I had a conversation with my dad as well. Because he started a business when he moved up here, and anyone that starts a business, like the first 5 years are not profitable. And so he said, think of it as growing crops. And like with each track that I make is like a little seed that I plant in the ground. And when a plant grows, a lot of times it's the roots that grow, and you don't see it coming up, but that doesn't mean it's not growing. And so he said, when my dad started his business, he just every day planted crops. And then at one point, it all just kind of grew. And so I kind of just had that in my head. Also, I kind of really didn't have anything else going. And I know this is taboo to say, but my motivation was money. I wanted to make money. And that's the thing with library, with at least what I was doing, which I eventually sort of changed my attitude on this, but is that I didn't necessarily, it wasn't art. It wasn't like I was like, I'm making masterpieces here. I'm not really expressing myself. And so, but because I used to do, be in bands and do projects and stuff, but I was focusing myself 100% on this, trying to have as much fun and make it as artful as I can, but knowing that it had to just be functional. It had to be something that can be usable on TV. And so, and little placements here and there kind of got me going. Like, okay, cool, this is working. It was like $5 here, $2 there, $50 here, and but knowing just pure faith, just from talking to Christian and my dad, just said keep going. And so I just said, I'm just gonna keep doing this until.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's like, and that's so true, because you have to have people in your life that believe in you and do give you those pep talks. And it's so cool that your dad believed in what you were doing, because I know a lot of dads probably wouldn't believe in that. They'd say, man, you've been working 4 years.
Well, at first he was like, but then he saw it's like a legitimate thing, because it's actually stuff is getting, once I started getting stuff on TV, he's like, oh, and then, I mean, not that he didn't believe me, but it was like any dad.
It's a weird animal, because you ask anybody about this, it sounds like a pipe dream. It's like you get your music on TV, like that's kind of what like those big artists do, and that's what big composers do. Like you're just a regular dude in your home studio. Really, they're gonna give you a shot? Yes, they do. It's kind of weird, but they really do. That's really cool though. But I really want to emphasize that how important it is to have people in your corner, especially having a social circle in some way of people that are just cheering you on. And that's really one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on today. And this video, this interview right here, will maybe be that pep talk for a lot of producers that are in that phase. So guys, please save this podcast or this YouTube video, however you're watching it, and come back to this anytime you get to that point of like, I don't know if it's going to work out and I'm getting a little bit burned out. Just know that you're looking at two guys who do this full time, who also felt that exact same way, who felt punched in the gut many, many times. That was like the most... that was the feeling that I had, that I remember the most from my royalty checks, was not excitement, but punch in the gut. That was it. Yeah. Gut punch.
Royalty day happened, I'm like, yeah!
Always. It was always that. There'd be a little excitement when it climbed, but it was like, okay, it got up, but it was like only $500 more than the last one. Like I was expecting $2,000 more, or, so your expectations, it never works out. And like you said, I want you to tell that story about, how you almost gave up. Now, you don't need to mention the specific numbers you earned, obviously, but you had a really huge jump in your royalties. And I want you to talk about that, because I know that this is one of the reasons, well, I know that this is a common story, that a lot of producers, unfortunately, get started for a year or two and then they give up because they don't see the results right away. And it's that next royalty check that sometimes it goes right up to the sky, and they realize, crap, what did I do? And they go rushing back into the business. So if you can tell that story real quick, man, it's so fascinating.
Yes, I remember at this point I landed a theme. It was the NBC Sports Desk theme, and I didn't think much of it. I mean, I thought it was cool, but I didn't really know what it was. And I knew that themes could be lucrative. I think the only theme I landed at that point was a company called Radius, which was like a fitness app that only lasts a year. I did the theme song for that, and but this one I landed, and it was a pretty good upfront. The cool thing about themes is they give you upfront money, and so that one I got like $4,000 upfront, which was from us. Like, okay, cool. Like I would be satisfied with that. And so then, but my royalty checks at that point were hovering around 1,000 to 1,500. I remember when I first broke the 1,000 point, I was like, ugh! And I'm in it like 5 years at this point. This is 2015, so 5 years and maybe some change. And so after 5 years, I'm still hovering around the 1,000 point, and I'm maybe at that point had like 200 library tracks out there floating around in TV land. And I remember I was having dinner with my parents. It was the night before royalty night, and I was like, you know what? I was like, tomorrow's check sucks. I was like, I'm going to give up, because if I'm going to not make money doing music, I might as well make it like music that I really like arts music. Because I listen to I listen to Tool. I listen to I like weird stuff, and with library music, it's very functional music. So it's you're not exactly expressing yourself all the time. So it's like I'm gonna focus on my weird art music, and maybe I'll have to get a job again. At that point I was mooching off my parents, so I was kind of just scraping anywhere I can, selling stuff, and so the next day I wake up and there's a ton of money in my account from Sports Desk. It was like 30 grand. And so I was like, what? And I remember calling. I was like, is this right? And then you had to wait till like the next day to get, because I had direct deposit. So at that point, so I like every I don't know if some people have this, if they have direct deposit at midnight, BMI night, like right after midnight you get deposits. So it's like Christmas 4 times a year. And so I was like, this has to be a mistake. And it wasn't a mistake. And I was like, so it's because it was a theme. It gets run a lot. Not only do you get theme bonus, which is like it doubles it, but it gets ran every time there's a sports show. Every time they cut the commercial, this thing's getting played, and there's a lot of people, and it's on NBC. So I was like, so that means next check, is it going to be the same? I was like, yeah, as long as this thing's on, it's going to be like that. So I jumped from this to this in one night. And I remember that morning, I was like, holy, and my dad called me. He's like, yeah, see, plants, the plants grow like the crops. And I was like, wow, okay. It's like when plants grow, I think bamboo is like that, where the roots grow and you can't see it. And then all of a sudden in one night, it just goes, that doesn't mean that it wasn't growing the whole time. I was like, at which point did that royalty check happen? It started when thought I was doing nothing, but really, it was the whole time I was working toward that royalty check. A good analogy, I thought about this before doing this, is imagine you're there's a rock and you have to split this rock in half, hammer. So you're hammering and nothing, and then all of a sudden you hit it once and the rock splits in half. Did the rock split in half because of that one hit, or was it all the hits that came before it? And so you think you're not doing anything, but a lot of, like me slaving it out, library track after library track, was with each track you do, you get a little better, you learn something, my quality gets better. And so my quality had gotten to a point where I was able to land an NBC theme. And whereas if I hadn't done those 200 library tracks before that, I wouldn't have got the theme. And of those 200 library tracks, I still make like, $5 here, $10 there, but the theme was like, and then I was like, I'm gonna hit this pretty hard. So since then, that's pretty much what I do. And it's been working.
That's so cool, man. I just, my heart just starts fluttering when I hear stories like that, because it's so cool to hear somebody who's winning in this business, because there's so much losing going on in the music industry. So it's cool to hear just a win story, And I think that's so smart too, that you called them, right? When you got that huge check that seemed out of the ordinary, because I've heard of horror stories, because the PROs can oversend you money. They can send you the wrong amounts. And I've heard of producers that went and spent the money, and then I think it was ASCAP called them out and said, by the way, that wasn't yours. We're going to have to recoup on that. That was not yours. And so you're screwed if you went and bought that new car, kind of a thing. So it's so smart to call. Like for anybody watching, if you get a monstrous check, it could be yours. It absolutely could be, but definitely give them a call before you go cash the check and start, spending it and planning what you're going to do with it. Very smart of you to do that, man. I want to kind of finish up this conversation with a little bit of your strategy for how you succeeded. Did you basically just stick with one library the entire time? Did you kind of work between a couple of different companies? Did you ever work directly with supervisors, or, what was your path? How did your path look like from, the start of your career to where you are now?
Yes, pretty much been for me one library, and Blazed Out Music. And the cool thing about them, it's Dave Christian. It's sort of several libraries. There's Beat Bites, which is in the Mega Tracks catalog, and then for a while we were doing minimal music, which you had stuff in there too. Warner Chappell, and now he's partnered up with Maddie, and they got Current Music, which that's where a lot of the custom gigs come through. So there's a library in there called Boombox. I actually have very little tracks in the actual Blazed Out catalog. So between Boombox, Blazed Out, or Beat Bites, a lot of B's, I have all that covered. I mean, basically several libraries, but it's all under the umbrella of Blazed Out. And the cool thing I like about them is I don't deal with music supervisors. They tell me what they want and I make it for them. So I can sit in my little hole here. I've never done anything business-like. I still know very little about the business. That's what they do. And that's where they get their cut from. And it's totally worth it for me to do that. And just since they've gotten some pretty good gigs, it's been good to stick with them, and they're continuing to kick ass. So fortunately, I haven't had to stray, and it's been working out pretty good. But I know a lot of people do, and everyone's got their different strategies for doing it. And
awesome, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Like if I was starting this over today, I don't know if the environment and landscape is different. If it's like a little more oversaturated, or like as far as 10 years ago. There's a lot of people doing it, but the thing about it, if there is a staggering statistic of a lot of people doing it, a lot of people trying to get in, if you just stick with it, a lot of people trying to get in, but a lot of people are giving up too after a year or two. because they realize it's work. And it's not like, well, I get to play guitar from home. I mean, there is a little bit of that. But it is like I treat it like a job. I wake up and I have a certain time every 9 o'clock in the morning after I've done my yoga and my coffee, and I work till noon. And which a lot of people go, you work 4 hours a day. I'm like, yeah, but it's like creative work. But if you just treat it like a job, and that's what I would suggest to anyone, is to just kind of not over analyze it and don't try to make masterpieces. Just treat it like a job. Like, this is the next track. There's a book, The War of Art. You ever read that book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it though.
That, if for anyone, I read that book in one sitting, and it's basically how this guy Stephen Pressfield, who's an author. He writes books, and he described his process. And I always thought that, like, being creative for a living, which is a whole other deal, having to be creative on demand. Basically, if you do it at the same time every day, preferably in the morning, when your brain is in like a different alpha state, and you work till noon. Stephen King, the most prolific author, he writes 2,000 words a day, and then he stops. And then for the rest of the day, he hangs out with his grandkids and he reads books and gets inspired and goes for walks. And you'll be surprised how much you make if you music you make if you just do it consistently. But you don't have to do it like 10 hours a day, unless you want to. But so that's my strategy. I work for like 4 hours a day, and then I chill for the rest of the day.
Awesome, man. That's great advice too, because you're absolutely right. Like, and I've become much more of a morning person now too. Like, I'll wake up at pretty much 4:35 a.m. because try it sometime, man. It'll. I
heard that's really good. I've tried that once. I actually got to try that again. I think my evening routines ruin my morning routines.
It's hard, yeah, because you do need to go to bed early. That's the hardest part, is getting into that sort of like, slowly, half hour at a time, going to bed early and earlier. But I started it in 2016. I will never go back to sleeping in again. I can't sleep in anymore. Actually, my body won't let me anymore. And I totally relate to you, what you said there. Like, in the morning, you feel more just alert, active, creative, more just excited. Same with me. I'm pretty much, I'm just in beast mode until around, 11 or noon. And then I want to go eat. Like, I'll do like, I usually don't eat breakfast, so I wait till noon to have my first meal. And then it's just kind of like a slow downward spiral from there, because my energy's starting to go and my willpower is starting to go. So you're right. Like,
you ever try making a track at like 6 o'clock at evening, at night, when you have to, and you're like, no, I'm going to do this. And then you stay up all night and you're like, look at me, I'm going the extra mile. And then I was like, well, what took me 2 hours at night, I could have done in a half hour in the morning. So
absolutely,
to make it seem like we're going the extra mile, but it's like, no, just burning yourself out.
But you're right about that. Just getting a schedule and a routine every single day that works for you and works for your family as well, right? That's the big thing that people need to realize too, that if you have kids, if you got family members, roommates, whatever, they need to be on board and understand that you need a little bit of, quiet time, studio time, alone time, to not be interrupted, to not be asked questions. But then obviously to have your own balance to say, okay, I want to spend some time with my kids or my family, so I'm not going to be a workaholic and be sitting in my studio for 12 hours a day. I do want to have a little bit of a life. Because some people that go down that path where they're getting hooked on the work, they really do burn out much quicker, because you need to kind of refill, you got to regenerate some of that excitement.
Keep inspired. And I still work on solo stuff, like just creative stuff, specifically for no reason other than because I like it. I make weird artsy guitar music. I don't even have an intention of putting it out there. I just do it because it fills me up, it re-inspires me. And then in the morning, it feeds the library stuff. Now it comes easier, and it's more fun. The idea is just kind of go. I never sit there at the screen and go, what am I doing next? It's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and then this, and this. Boom, there it is. And so staying inspired and just doing stuff like, read a book you wouldn't normally read, or, watch a movie that you wouldn't normally watch, or learn piano, learn how to paint, stuff like that. It all kind of feeds the soul, and then makes making music on demand a lot easier.
Perfect, man. I think we should end it on that one. That was a great bit of advice. So thank you, Todd, man. Appreciate your time today, buddy. Obviously, really good to see you, and I'm really, really happy that this is working out for you, and you're really doing well with it, man. So keep fighting the good fight, keep up the good work, and of course, thank you for sharing your story here, because I know a lot of producers, you'll probably see if you watch this on YouTube, you're going to see dozens and dozens of comments of people saying thank you for the extra push. I needed that. I know this is one of those videos that's going to do that for a lot of people, man. So thank you for paying that forward to sharing what happened to you. I think that's really going to make a big difference for people, man. If people want to get a hold of you or check you out, do you have any links or social media stuff you want to put out there?
No, I'm completely off social media, which I recommend to everybody. No, I do have an Instagram, but I don't have anything I'm promoting though. So
cool, man. Well, thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate your time today, man.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Sync My Music podcast. If you enjoyed the show and want me to do more episodes, all that I ask is that you leave me a review on whatever platform or app that you're listening to. It just takes a few seconds. I'll never charge for this podcast, and I want to keep it 100% ad-free. And your review right now will help me do just that. Thank you so much.